Okay, so I normally get my clients to come in and do 3 to 5 minutes on a treadmill on an incline. It's nice and low impact, walking about 3.5 to 4, really fast paced walk, or whatever they can manage on an incline of 6% or so. And that gets them really warm within 3 minutes, and then they can start their stretching. I go right to my dynamic stretching, and in this stretch, I'm stretching my adductors, so just rocking back and forth, taking it nice and easy, and then moving to fully kneeling and basically getting upright and really pushing my hips through to work on also the hip flexors, stretching out the hip flexors a bit. And on my left side, I've been sitting a lot, so too much, and with my knees elevated over my hips, which I think has probably set my left hip a little bit, made it a little bit tighter. So I'm spending a lot more time on my left side because it's also showing up in my adductors with squatting. I think the hip being jacked up kind of has affected my adductors as well. So spending a lot of time stretching out the adductors right now, and then I'm going to move into the hip flexors. So with the hip flexor stretch, I like to put my toes down because I feel like it allows you to stretch your quad a little bit more with your toes pointed into the ground or driving into the ground. Then your quads are going to get tight and you can't really stretch through them as well as you would be able to. Also, I like to push my shin into the ground. That kind of gets my quads warmed up as well and activated, and allows me to stretch and get a little bit more of an active stretch and kind of a contraction release, and allows to stretch a bit further as you kind of rock back and then rock forward again through the stretch, pushing down. And you're just trying to warm up everything. So everything's very dynamic before you start your workout. You don't want to hold anything too long, and then basically moving through the motions. So reaching up nice and high as you stretch and lean forward. You can also tilt your body to stretch more of the lateral, and then also turn your chest kind of across that front knee to stretch the inside of the hip flexor and a little bit into the groin. So you can do 5, 10, kind of 3 different angles, 5 to 10 times. Then we're into a glute stretch. So you're going to or bring that knee in front of you, and you're basically over top of your shin and your knee. And you can rock back and forth, side to side, forward and back to really loosen things up. You'll see from the side when I get there, you're really going to stretch out your body and reach far back with the other leg, and then keep your body upright. So you want to maintain a upright torso, so you're not slouching down. You're keeping your butt back and chest up to really stretch that the glutes out. So forward and back and forth, that kind of thing, loosen things up. And then moving on, next stretch, it's kind of a dynamic stretch, kind of like a yoga move, but it works really good for loosening up the hips and warming things up as well, and also loosening up the groin. So basically you are up on your back toe, keep the hips high, chest up, back straight. You're going to rotate, and you're reaching, looking up your arm, blowing out as you look up the arm. So you're going to be able to relax the muscles a little bit more, allow yourself to get a little bit bigger of a stretch into the glute. Then when you're coming down and around, you're going to reach your arm down towards the ground or through your armpit basically, and drop the hip to stretch the groin and the adductors a little bit more. Then I'll move to stretching my calves. So with my foot up on a box, or you'll see later on, I'm going to be stretching my calves again in between my sets, just because my calves are like chronically tight, and I'll be using a pull to put my foot up against. It works a little bit better. So you're basically leaning forward, straightening the leg, leaning back. So leaning forward, you're going to feel more into the lower portion of the calf, and then when you're leaning back, it's going to be more upper. And then you're just straightening the leg, bending the leg, keeping it pretty mobile and not holding it very long. You don't want to be holding stretches very long for a very long time, and because that's basically cooling the muscle down, and you don't want to be doing that before you go and start doing any strength work or jumping or anything. So you want to keep everything nice and dynamic and just work through the range of motion progressively. As you get warmer, you'll be able to stretch a bit further and further, but you're not holding any exercise for very long, maybe 3 seconds tops. You might see me hold my my calf stretch a little bit longer, but nothing longer than 10 seconds. You don't want to be cooling down the muscles. Then we're into the glute bridges. So with the glute bridges, you want to be doing a pelvic tilt and then driving the hips up. And you really want to pull those shoulder blades way back. That's going to help stabilize your body. And you can even drive your elbows into the bench or the ground if you're doing it from the ground to help stabilize the torso so that you're not really pushing yourself and rocking yourself back. You want to try to keep everything nice and stable from your feet and your back, and then just driving the hips straight up. You want to limit how much you might be moving forward and back. Just focusing on tilting the hips, driving the hips up, and also engaging your core. So bring your stomach in as you tilt the hips to drive those hips up, just to focus in on the glutes. You're going to pause at the top for a good 1 to 2 count. And on this one, I'm using my bands. So I'm working on the outside of the glutes. You can also throw a bar on top for a little added weight. But if you're doing this with a band and just focusing on pushing against the band as you go down and up in a slow controlled movement, within 10 reps, you should be feeling pretty good burn. And that's going to help get you prepared for using your glutes when you are doing your squats. You're also engaging your core a little bit too, so that's going to help as well. Also, one more thing to note with the glute bridges, well, a couple things. Your feet should be basically directly underneath your knee as you bridge up. So if you're not feeling your glutes very well, it might be because your feet are too far forward and you're feeling more hamstrings. Also, keep your head and chin tucked down a little bit, because that's going to help keep your body and your spine more stiff and straight. So if your head is way back, like you'll see a lot of people do in the gym, if it's way back, that's going to cause you to actually hyperextend your back as you go down and up. So it's not going to allow for a straight spine, which could over time affect your back and also just make it less effective. So you want to have a stiff torso through most of these movements and able to just isolate the intended area that we're working. So the next glute activation exercise is what I call a glute side plank. So with your elbow directly underneath your shoulder, closer to your rib cage, you really want to keep the shoulder blade tucked in. Then you're going to drive your hips forward and back as well as up, lifting the top knee, just pivoting off the foot to kind of push the hips through. And then I hold this for 3 seconds. 8 to 10 reps usually gives you a really good burn. And of course, you're doing either side. If you find that it's hard to hold yourself from there, you can go off the hand. You might find that a little bit easier as you're higher up. Or you can go onto a smaller platform off the elbow, which would be the easiest. And you're going to hold yourself up for a 3-second count and then back down and up, making sure you get lots of forward and back movement. Next, we got the clamshells. So this is very popular exercise in a physiotherapy clinic. Works really, really well. You just have to make sure that you're locking in your core. So you'll see me do a little bit of a pelvic tuck twice. You'll see as I demonstrate, bring my hips underneath me, and that's going to keep my core engaged and my hips in place, locked in place, so that I'm able to isolate my glutes. Knees will be forward ahead of the hips a little bit slightly, and then you're pivoting off of the bottom foot. So you're going to be holding it up there for a couple seconds. Make sure that the hip stays pointed on an angle downward towards the ground and that you're not rolling back as you lift the leg. Should be holding it up there for 2 seconds, and then returning. It's going to be about a 2-second hold, and you won't be able to lift very, very high. If you're lifting it high, you're likely not feeling it in the corner of the glute, and you're likely rolling back. So lock the hips in place. You can do 15 to 20 of these. 12 to 15 really for a warm-up is suffice. But if you're just targeting the glutes and not really planning on doing any squats, and you're just working on building up the glutes or isolating, then go up to 20 reps. Then finally, the last option you could have or do is the banded monster walk or lateral walk. 2 variations. So lifting the leg up and rotating the knee out. You're trying to drop the knee and the foot in the same plane, basically, not reaching your foot, or trying to lock your hips into place and then really just pushing that hip out with everything nice and stiff. You never want to bend the knee and reach with the foot. So after you've done your 1 to 2 chosen glute activation exercise, 1 to 2 sets, you can do this one as well as a, somewhat more of a mobility type drill, which will also get your hips nice and loose again and get those glutes firing. So this one you could do like 10 steps one way, 10 steps the other way, and you're just doing back and forth, staying nice and low, trying to maintain a good upright posture in a deep squat. Knees nice and wide, pushing the knees out. And then after all that, you're ready to squat. So that's your warm up. It should only take about 10 minutes. So I showed you a few different options for glute activation exercises. Again, I say do 1 or 2. And then you can do the crab walk just as another kind of mobility thing to open up the hips and stretch out the groin, because that's going to help you with your squats. You want to keep the knees open when you're doing your squats, and it's going to help you get yourself nice and deep in your squat if you have loosened up your groin. So next, getting underneath the bar. So when setting up to step underneath the bar, you want to make sure everything is set up good and you have lots of clearance. So you should be able to lift the barbell up off of the pegs, the rack, a good 2 to 4 inches. Start with just the bar. You're going to make sure your heels are directly underneath it. Big breath in, fill that belly, open the knees, then you're going to pop it up and step back 2 steps. Get your feet kind of comfortable where you like it. It's going to usually be about hip width or a little bit wider, maybe a bit more narrow, but you don't want to go super wide. If you're going super wide, you'll likely have some mobility issues in the hips that you need to work out before you start doing squats with a barbell on your back. So you'll see me, I'm squatting down pretty low, making sure my hips are below parallel or at parallel, and then you have the safety guides on, making sure that you are able to come within an inch or just tap it, so that you're able to comfortably set it down if you have trouble getting back up. So now I'm just stretching out my calves because they felt tight. I'm stretching out the quad, so I'm pushing down to get a bigger stretch as I go down and up, making sure that the toes are facing forward, and I can kind of angle the foot as I push down into the ground and move up and down to stretch different areas of the quad. So now going over the squat again after I've loosened up, making sure that your hands and your fingers are kind of near the rings. So there's going to be rings on either side of the bar, and you want to have your hands on the inside of that. And that way you can kind of judge where you should poke your head through and under. Then you're going to pull the shoulder blades down as you saw. The barbell should be comfortably resting on your rear delts and across your mid traps as you squeeze your shoulder blades down and back. Should have a nice shelf there for the bar to rest. Get your elbows really close to your sides and forward. Big breath in before you go down. Drive the knees out, then pop up. Big breath in before you go down. Hold the breath. Knees are open. Drive your hips up. Big breath in. Knees open. Drive the hips up. So the bar should be traveling in a straight line up and down, kind of in the midline of your foot. I'm going a bit ahead, but you want to make sure that's right in the midline of the foot. That means you're squatting well and you have good mobility in the hips and you're able to drop your butt down and you're able to maintain a fairly upright torso. Okay, finally, if you're not able to or not comfortable squatting with a bar on your back, you can do front squats with a kettlebell or a dumbbell. Pick up the kettlebell with a deadlift if you are good with those, or squat down nice and deep. Now, you don't want to be holding the kettlebell from the handles and your elbows beside you, because that's going to cause your shoulders to roll forward and you're not going to be able to stay upright. So with your hands right underneath the kettlebell, handle away from you, you can keep your elbows more forward and torso more upright as you squat down. Make sure you're breathing in, filling the belly with air, keeping that intra-abdominal pressure and midsections nice and stiff and stable. Avoid letting your air out and just drooping down to the bottom like this, because as you come up, you're hurting your back. You're doing a lot of flexion through the spine. Fill the belly with air, nice and tight. Come down, shoulder blades pulled back and up.